Hey everyone, Miacidae here, welcome back to Darkest Dungeon. So, continuing off with the modded spotlights, and going over some of the older mods that people have asked me to kind of make more or less guides for, which I'm not sure this is going to live up to the expectation of a guide. However, this is still going over one of the older classes that people have confusion for. I've seen asked a lot about how do we use the DD2 Duelist, how does she function, what teams is she good with. We'll be going over all of that today, in addition to the normal stuff for the spotlights, going over her skills, camping skills, trinkets, stats. We'll also be going over how the aggressive stance, defensive stance works, because realistically, she's a transformation hero, and that's what that equates to. I've seen a lot of confusion over, again, I'm going to go over some case uses and show the case uses on how to use that. So, all stuff to look forward today. However, in true spotlight fashion, let's go over the miscellaneous and fun notes as a start. As you can see, her canon name is Sahar. This is the DD2 Duelist based off of Darkest Dungeon 2. This is actually the class from Darkest Dungeon 2 where her canon name is Sahar. She is not religious. Her on-crit effect is she gains plus 10 dodge for 1 turn. Her default stance, which as you can see, she has aggressive and defensive stance. She starts off in aggressive stance when she enters a dungeon, and she will revert to aggressive stance on battle end. So every time you change her to defensive stance with one of her skills, she will always revert to aggressive stance. That's a very important thing. She uses the Training Ring District. You can only have one DD2 Duelist in the party. I'm assuming this is due to size 0 shenanigans. You can gain Crimson Court trinkets by winning combat with her in the expedition or interacting with curios when selecting her in the Crimson Courtyards. And for those of you scared about her daze effect, there is a little note about that right here as well. Her debuff-based daze is the version of daze which works on the debuff resistance and chance, instead of stun resistance and chance. The latter of the two is used for DD2 or Butcher's Circus. It was devised to mimic DD2's daze. Enemies who are dazed will act last, and you cannot daze already stunned or dazed enemies. Otherwise, that should be it for the actual DD2 Duelist's fun notes. So before we actually get into the DD2 Duelist skills, I did forget about this, just because I've seen some people kind of confused about the aggressive defensive stance. I've seen some people be intimidated about how to approach some things like that. Think about them like transformation classes. Once again, what I generally do is just kind of forget about defensive stance is there unless you're actively trying to get into defensive stance, because you will always be in aggressive stance. So you will always be getting the aggressive stance buffs no matter what, unless you try to change. Touche here, this is your basic hit. This can be used from ranks 1, 2, and 3. This can be used on ranks 1, 2, and 3. In aggressive stance, which is your main stance, has a very high chance of debuffing the target for plus 18% damage received, and I believe that is for 3 rounds. So if you keep using Touche, you can get up to, at max rank once again, 54% damage received on certain targets, which means the target takes more damage from any source. That's physical damage, that's blight damage, that's bleed damage, and technically fire damage, but fire damage is just technically another source of physical damage to me. It just amps all of those up, making them that much easier to take out. So with 54% damage received, that means 10 will turn into 15. So if they're bleeding for 10, that tick turns into 15. If they're blighted for 10, that tick turns into 15. You can see how things turn a lot easier to take down. And now, while that might be harder to get to because 3 hits on the same target, 2 is easier to achieve on bulkier targets like the Swine Scavenger, bosses, things like that. However, if you're in defensive stance for whatever reason, like I said, Trinket, some of her skills put her there, it's minus damage instead. And a lot more at that at max rank, it's minus 28% damage. Stacking that up, that immediately goes to 56%. And then if I can do my math right, 84. That 3 stack is going to be a lot harder to hit too, but 56%, you're taking half the damage from the target before they hit your protection, before they hit your minus damage received, which is fairly powerful depending upon the boss. Think about this swine god doing half damage to you. So either way, Touche is a very powerful starting skill. This is your bread and butter with the Duelist. Next up we have Disengage. Now Disengage always will move you back, but is usable from ranks 1, 2, and 3 and still will hit ranks 1, 2, and 3. So if you're in rank 3, you can't use it the following turn unless you're dancing with someone, but this will plus her dodge, which she already has a good dodge at 35 as a base, for plus 12. So if you're dancing with someone, or you have her in rank 1 and just continuously use this, that's 12, 24, 36, to her 35. Now she has 71 dodge before any dodge trinkets, making her into a dodge tank. In aggressive stance, this will mark the target she hits, but also switch her to defensive stance. It's also a slightly lower damaging hit, as you can see, minus 30 damage modifier, and then in defensive stance, which you'll always use if you've already used Disengage once, you will no longer be an aggressive after you've used Disengage once. Instead of marking your target, you'll be lowering their accuracy every time you use Disengage, but you'll still be getting the plus dodge effect from this, and you'll still be moving back every time you use Disengage. So not only is it upping your dodge, but it's also lowering the accuracy of the thing that you're hitting, for a very good debuff chance at that, so you're even less likely to be hit. Next up we have Flèche. I failed French, so I'm probably pronouncing these wrong. This can be used from ranks 2, 3, and 4, not from rank 1, and it can be used onto ranks 2, 3, and 4. This moves her into rank 1, unless someone is immobilized for whatever reason. This has a higher accuracy base of 115, and a higher crit modifier of plus 15, as you can see compared to the other two moves so far, and will remove dodge buffs gained from self-combat skills. So if you've gotten dodge buffs from Disengage, Flèche will remove those dodge buffs. However, aggressive stance, which baseline modifier, remember, if you haven't used Disengage yet or one of her other skills or the trinkets, you're always in aggressive stance. This does plus 15% damage and plus 5 crit, on top of the already higher crit modifier. So you're doing more damage and you're more likely to crit. If you're using this while you're in defensive stance, which you could have already used Disengage to get there, you switch back to aggressive and you get a riposte. So you could 1-2 with Disengage from rank 1, so you can use Flèche, be in defensive, so you can Flèche, be back in aggressive, and now have a riposte, and just keep 1-2ing that combo if you wanted. That way you have a riposte, and that way you keep doing damage. However, that way you're not getting the plus damage from the aggressive stance. However, that is a pretty nice combo. Next up we have the boot. I'm not sure how the boot is usable from rank 3, but it is. So the boot is usable from ranks 1, 2, and 3 onto ranks 1 and 2. This is a melee attack once again, and has a minus 75% damage modifier. However, it does have a plus 12% crit modifier, for what that's worth, and has a knockback by 2. In aggressive stance, this will mark the target, and will daze the target. Now remember, the daze is based off of debuff modifier, and you need to pass the debuff resistance, and the daze will make them go last in the turn order. In defensive stance, which you need to have used Disengage, Preparation, which we'll go over in a little bit, or a Trinket to get to, it instead stuns and lowers their speed. Personally, I like the aggressive on it more, but that's me. But you, no matter what, always get the knockback from this one, before taking in consideration whatever the aggressive or the defensive do. Next up we have Coup de Grace. This can be used from any row onto ranks 2, 3, and 4. I believe this is her only ranged attack. It has pretty good accuracy at 115 at max rank, minus 30% damage modifier. This actually is one of her only moves with a cooldown, I believe. anything else just can be used over and over and over, or as a one use per battle. An aggressive stance, which once again, base stance, will debuff the target for plus 30% damage received and minus damage. So you get the effects of both of Touche's debuffs. They take more damage and they do less damage to you. And higher percents at that at plus 30% damage received and minus damage to you. But once again, it's on a cooldown. So technically you could ramp up more with Touche. And Touche can hit roll 1 where coup de grace can't. And coup de grace can hit roll 4 where Touche can't hit roll 4. So there's different case uses for them. And in defensive stance, coup de grace can stun. So coup de grace and the boot are her stuns if you want to use those. But you have to be in defensive stance. I'm going to save again for last. Preparation is the only other way to get to another stance. So doubling back, if you use disengage, that is an attack that gets you to defensive stance. If you use flesh, that is an attack that gets you to aggressive stance. Your first use of preparation will buff your party until combat end for minus 25% stress taken at max rank and plus accuracy, and ends your turn because it is a buff. And it switches you to whatever your other stance is. So if you're in aggressive, it switches you to defensive. If you're in defensive, it switches you to aggressive. And then it ends your turn. The next time you use it, you gain an extra action while also switching your stance. So no matter what, you will switch your stance. It's just what you get otherwise. So the first use, you get the buff. The second use after that, you get the extra action while also switching your stance. So it depends upon how you would like to switch your stance. If you would like to just attack and get to defensive, use disengage. If you would like to attack and get back to aggressive, use flesh. If you want the just free flip after the first use on longer fights, go with preparation, because that gets you the extra action and actually gets you the plus 10 accuracy, which you might need on some heroes, because that buffs heroes other than herself. Now for her really broken move that I've seen some people not totally understand. Again, so this is only one use per battle, but I believe you can shard dust this and whatever else to get this back. So again, can be used on any row, onto any row of any ally. This targets an ally. As you can see, this has a chance to stun herself. At max rank, it's a 105% chance to stun herself, but she has a 70% chance to resist the stun. So realistically, it's a 35% chance to stun herself before any other trinkets are thrown in. And then, target acts last on next turn. So if the target has gone already and you throw this on, they will act very last on the next action. That means all your other heroes and all the other enemies will go first. If the hero you throw this on hasn't acted yet, they will get to act and get all the effects from this. But then if the battle hasn't ended, they will act very last next turn, meaning all the things I just said of all the other heroes, including Sahar, and all the enemies will get to go first before the hero that got, again, put on them. Now for the broken things from, again. So whoever you put this on gains an extra action from a few things. The next non-lethal attack they do will give them an extra action, and the next friendly skill they do will give them an extra action. These stack. So technically you can have 3 actions. So I can use Baldwin. I can use Revenge. Get the buffs from Revenge, which are plus 35% damage, 11 crit, 11 accuracy. Look at a target and do Chop. Oh, the target's not dead. Chop again. That's one combo. I can look at Yuzu and go, oh, you're in Moon form. I want you on Sun form. And everyone needs a heal? Okay. Well, Moonlight Embrace. I get an extra action. Change form. I'm going to banish someone. That's my second action. That person's now banished. Change form again because I got an extra action. She's now in Sun form because I've gotten those 2 extra actions. I can now Fairy Fire and absolutely nuke from Sun form, or I could use Solar Ray or Solar Flare, depending upon her row. With the Silent, there's a weird combo you can do. Noxious Fume for plus Blight skill chance, all enemies get the Blight. Then you do Catalyst on something that's blighted. Then you can just keep switching back and forth. Technically, you could get a 9 Blight on turn 1. Technically, you could get a 12 Blight on turn 1 after using, say, Glass Knife or Neutralize, because you're getting an extra action after that. The Kraken Slayer. You use Reel 'em in to move back into row 4. You use Blood Hunter to mark all of them for the duration of the bleed, also giving her plus crit and plus bleed chance. And then you use the Kill to do plus damage versus bleeding and marked. As long as they're bleeding, you get the extra damage. There's so many combos that you can pull off with this, and I'm gonna be showing a few more of this. The plus extra actions is so powerful, and that's just within the own hero's economy. That's not factoring in what other heroes can do if you already have a few things going. And that's also not factoring in the plus damage received from the Duelist, or if a hero gets plus damage if something's marked, or if someone has plus damage if something's already stunned. You can do a lot because she is the debuffing queen. And then she also goes really, really well in a few other parties, which I'll cover later. That being said, again, is probably her most busted move if you just want to utterly destroy a encounter or a boss. That would be my go-to of like, set all this up. There's half the boss's health, or half that mini boss, or 2-3 of the enemies. I've done it. Next up, let's actually go over her camping skills, because some of these are really good, and one of them needs a little bit of a strange note, because you just kind of need to remember it's there. So starting off, we have Ruthless Instruction. This is a 4 time cost and affects 1 companion. This has a 75% chance to minus 50 stress from that companion, and has a 25% chance to give them plus 12 crit for 4 battles. You do have a chance of both of them popping off, and you do have a chance of neither of them popping off. Next up, we have Displacement. This is a 2 time cost and is a very powerful one. It gives her plus 10 dodge for 4 battles. It also does lower her movement resistance for 4 battles. However, if you're going a dodge build on her, especially considering her skills can build her dodge even further, plus 10 dodge is pretty powerful on her. At max rank, this gives her 45 dodge before the skills pop in and before trinkets pop in. So she can very easily go into a dodge build and be a dodge tank, which I have done. It's very, very successful. Next up, we have Meditation. This affects both her stances, but I feel like it helps her aggressive more. So it's a 4 time cost that affects herself once again. It gives her plus 20% damage and 10 crit if she is in aggressive stance for 4 battles. So that's more damage, more crit for aggressive. And it is plus 15 dodge if she is in defensive stance for 4 battles. So if you wanted to go all out on the attack, this is really good. However, if you're already in defensive and using stuff to go into defensive, you can use Meditation and Displacement and get plus 25 dodge. That puts her at a base 60 at rank 6 before anything else. That is something to look at if you wanted a dodge tank, or you need to survive a little bit longer. Just to give options to people who like, hey, she's on her last legs, we need her to live for 1-2 more battles. That's an easy way to get her through that. So finally, Flick. This is a 3 time cost and affects herself again, so her camping skills are very selfish. This gives her a passive riposte. If I recall correctly, there is no like buff thing down here that will tell you, hey, she has a riposte. But the riposte lasts for 4 battles. But the riposte gets plus 10 accuracy, has a 6% crit modifier, minus 50% damage, and has a decent accuracy. So let's take a quick look at the base stats of the Duelist, the resistances, and a quick look at relatively them all around. Once again, everything I'm referencing right here is based off of them being a level 6. So if you're lower level, the things may vary, but the only stat I have boosted is speed because of a quirk, and the only thing that I have lowered is disease. Otherwise, everything should be base from the levels. So starting off, we have 35 health, which all things considered because of her other stats isn't too bad. That's slightly lower than, say, the Bounty Hunter or the Highwayman. Highwayman having 43, Bounty Hunter having 45, but she has much higher dodge as a base, keeping her alive from that. But she has other survivability things going for her. She has a base 35 dodge, which we've kind of gone over in the kit. Her camping skills can put her up to 60 if you use them. She can easily get 12, 24, 36 from disengage if you're using that before trinkets are involved. So if you really wanted her to, she could get up to 100 dodge within her own kit before adding in trinkets. She has a base 5% crit before adding that to her usually about 10 to 15% crit modifier on the skills. So she has about a 15 to 20% chance to crit before trinkets are added in, or her camping skills. At max level, she has 8 to 14 damage, and she will have about 9 speed, all things considered. For her resistances, we're sitting at 70% stun resistance, which is important for Again, because once again, Again will stun you. So at max level, Again will have about a 35% chance to stun, which you obviously don't want to stun you. For Blight, we have about a 95% resistance. Disease is at 30% base resistance. Mine has slightly lower, as you can see there. Death Blow sitting at 75%. Movement at 100%, but can be lowered by displacement if you so wish. Bleed sitting at 95%, debuff at 80, and trap at 90. It's also worth noting her skills hover around 110 to 115 accuracy, so you may not need to throw the accuracy trinkets on her in particular, unless you're going for the riposte, which does have a lower accuracy. Next up, let's go over the trinkets, because they can actually change how you play her quite a bit, all things considered. The first trinket, Spare Grip, is a trinket that I see a lot with one of the people that helped on the DD2 Duelist, and that is Iris. So on kill, gain a Duelist trinket. You have a 7% chance that this happens, but that means anytime the Duelist kills a enemy, you have a 7% chance after the battle ends to gain any of the other Duelist trinkets. When you're not in the Crimson Courtyard, that means getting the Blade Oil, the Dark Lanithorn, and the Lover's Glove. If you're in the Crimson Courtyard, that also includes the Academy Ring or the Instructor's Cape. If you're fighting Crimson Court enemies outside of the Crimson Court, I do believe that actually includes these as well, but it also gives plus 5 dodge and plus 5 accuracy if you do just have all these trinkets. Next up, we have the Blade Oil. This actually goes really well into her kit because it's just plus 10% melee damage, and everything other than coup de grace is a melee attack for her if it is a attack. It also gives plus 10% debuff chance, and almost every move she does is a debuff. And it does plus 10% stun skill chance, which the boot and coup de grace can stun. Next up, we have Dark Lanithorn. This one's a little bit interesting. It is her rare trinket, and she gets plus 25% damage received while using it. However, that being said, if you're in defensive stance, when using attacks or when you riposte, the party gets a 5% heal of their total max HP. And on a riposte hit, debuff the target to have minus 12 accuracy. Next up, her very rare trinket. Probably one of her more broken trinkets, especially at lower levels. So when you're using this, when you use Again, if you are in defensive stance, you gain aggressive effects on your next action. If I was in defensive stance and I used Touche, I'm already doing minus 28% damage, the debuff, to the target. So they're doing almost 30% less damage to me. But because I used Again, I gain the aggressive to that. So now they're also gaining the plus 18% damage received for the next action. Or say I used Flesh. So now not only am I switching to aggressive, getting the riposte on top of that, but I'm also getting the plus 5 crit and plus 15% damage on that attack. However, how I usually use this is because Again will have minus 100% stun chance, meaning Again will almost never stun you. So it's a lot easier to use Again And then the next turn, Sahar can just keep using Touche. She can keep using whatever you need to do to keep upping the damage received of the target. And say I was already using this on my bounty hunter here. He can mark his target, then he can collect bounty twice on it. It's really just that easy. The downside of this is on attack miss. If you miss because she has high accuracy, self-stress +8. Onto her Crimson Court trinkets. First up we have the Academy Ring. This gives her +8 crit and +33% move chance with her skills, which is the boot which has knockback on it. And it gives her an additional debuff, which on attack miss debuffs the target to have -100 dodge. So that means you have to miss for that debuff to go off. However, everyone after that, including Sahar, pretty much will not miss after that because they will not have dodge. That's a 500% base of going off, so it is almost guaranteed to go off unless they have some weird bonkers resistances. And it's for 2 full rounds, so for 2 rounds after that. Then we have the Instructor's Cape, one I actually really like because this is +18 dodge. Just me throwing this on here. Her dodge goes up to 53 before we use anything else. Other than that, Touche will start moving her back by 1, so this turns her into more of a dancing character. So now Touche and Disengage will move her back by 1, and Preparation is now disabled if you are below 50% health. So that is the more downside of that trinket, because Preparation is the skill that you generally are easily using to switch from stance to stance to stance. But like I said, a lot of people use Sahar or the Duelist just in one stance or the other, unless you're really min-maxing. A lot of the times people aren't switching from aggressive to defensive to aggressive to defensive, and other times if they are, they're doing that with either Disengage or Flesh, or they're just staying in one. So it's not that much of a downside. And then if you have these, both of them equipped for the set, Riposte will do +50% damage, which there are multiple ways of getting the Riposte. Like I said, you can either do Flush and Defensive to get the Riposte, or you can do Flick for the Riposte, which is a camping skill, or you can do Flick, her camping skill, for just having it for 4 battles. Then any attack will also apply defensive stance effects, and on attack you will switch to defensive stance. So it's kind of the opposite of Lover's Glove here, where you, instead of gaining the offensive, you gain the defensive stance effects. So say I used Touche once again as the example here. I'd both get the plus damage received on the enemy, so I'm doing more damage with subsequent attacks, but I'm also lowering the damage they do. However, in addition to that, you're switching to defensive stance after you do that attack. And then, because I have tried doing this, if you have both the Academy Ring and the Instructor's Cape on, so you have that set equipped, you cannot spam Flesh to go to aggressive and then switch back to defensive. You will always get put back to defensive at the end of the attack. That is how the order goes. So you would need to use Preparation to get back into offensive or aggressive stance if that is what you wanted to do with the set. So if you use a set, you're more than likely going to be stuck in defensive after the first attack. So you're going to want to make sure you use whatever you want to get that first effect active. And then finally her Color of Madness trinket, Posthumous Tutelage. So Preparation, buffs last for 1 more combat. So the minus stress taken plus accuracy, that lasts for an entire combat longer. On skill use or combat end, switch to defensive stance. So that means no matter what, pretty much she's going back to defensive stance. On combat end, instead of going to offensive, she'll be in defensive for people who like that more. Unfriendly skill, which is again and Preparation, it will remove mark on other heroes and mark herself, which is really good for being a dodge tank. However, it does minus her damage by 40%, so she's not going to be doing as much damage. And as it says here, this is incompatible with the Crimson Court set, which switches her to defensive stance. So for people playing with 3 or more trinkets, do not equip both the Color of Madness and the Crimson Court. it does tell you there it is incompatible. And then let's go over how to use her in a party, and then what party she's good in, because this was a question I've seen a lot, and quite honestly, it's that she's good in any party, but let's go over the case uses for her. I'm going to try to cover my bases here. I'm going to give people a lot of uses for her so that hopefully people have a good idea of how to use the Duelist. I know I've gone over this one a lot, but just having whatever other two heroes you want along with the Leper. She ups the damage the Leper does with just Touche, and then the Leper does plus 18, 36, 54% damage just because of Touche. Then, when you want a target really down, you can use again. So for this instance, I would have the Lover's Glove and probably the Blade Oil. That way we're doing more damage and we have more debuff chance. And I would just be strictly using her in aggressive stance. Or, instead of using Touche, one of the times we could use Coup de Grace on, say, row 2. Now, if I used again on the Leper, after we've gotten to round 2 or 3 and we've landed a few of the plus damage received debuffs, the Leper can use Revenge, upping his damage. That's the friendly skill. He can then chop on one of the targets that had the plus damage received from Touche and or Coup de Grace. If they're not dead, that's the non-lethal attack. Then he can chop another target, be that the thing he's already hit, or he can heal and take out that target and damage another one. That's Casey's one, just raw damage, and that can be used with multiple targets. That can be used in a marking team. Let's have a Blight team set up here. So turn 1, we use Baneful Breath from the Matriarch. That's 5 Blight on the enemy party. We go with Hush, that's now 8 Blight, plus whatever damage that was. If then we add the Silent, that's now 20 Blight. If we add plus damage received to that, 20 Blight now turns into 24 damage because of one hit from Touche. Because it's 3.6 damage, so it will probably round up. So every tick from the Blight will just tick for more and more and more. You can do the same with the Bleeding team. You can just ramp up those dot ticks, especially on a bigger party. And you can either spread out the Touche damage and the Coup de Grace damage. So that's plus the debuff is spread out between targets, so that's spreading out the dot damage as well to just annihilate things, or you can stack it up on one target. It's really good for people like the Messiah here, who have, if they get a kill with, say, one of their skills like One Shot, it ups their damage for the entire quest. So it's really good for ramping them up early quest, so they just do damage late quest. For the Courier Hunter or the Commandant, you can use a Call Beyond. Default, prepare this skill. Depending upon the hero, this either counts as a friendly or their non-lethal attack. And depending upon the hero, then you use the other one. And then the next action, you can actually use Call Beyond to finish off the enemy party. Cerebral taught me that one. For a really silly group, you could go in all on Disengage. That way, all she does is buff her dodge. In this case, I probably would either use Dark Lanthorn or a dodge trinket, either Spare Grip or another dodge trinket. And this way, she starts with at least 53 dodge, if not more if you're not using another dodge trinket. Everyone else has dodge trinkets and you have a dodge team. I've gotten her up to 80 dodge this way before everything else, and the entire party doesn't get hit the entire quest. And you just go through and delete everything without being hit. It's a dodge party. You don't need a healer. You just need to delete the enemy. If the boss has a lot of debuff resistance, you just pop more debuff chance on her with another trinket, and the debuffs from Touche and her other skills land more. So you might not even use the Blade Oil, but the premise is the same. So in that case, you might be using the Baron's Lash if she has the Crimson Curse. Simple as that. But you just want the debuffs to keep landing so she can keep doing the debuffs. If you need a marker in a marking party, she can use the boot to knock someone back, mark them, they go last, then someone else finishes them off. And then if the target stay marks like it's a mini-boss, then she can follow up with either Touche, Coup de Grace, or one of her damaging moves, depending upon how you want her set up. You don't have to be using, again, you could say use Flesh at that point in time to do some damage if you wanted her to do some damage. You could use Disengage as a just in case to have some dodge going, or if you wanted to have again on for the plus accuracy for everyone here. She could easily be a mark spammer, knocking people back, dazing them so that people can just get the plus damage versus marked, and the boot doesn't do much damage. So if it's someone like Guan Yu the Martial Saint who does more damage if they're above 80% health, the boot isn't going to do much damage, so that he also gets that modifier. As long as you're using her with the right skills, you can slot her into any party, and especially if you're slotting her with the right trinkets, she really just fits into any party. So that's kind of why I wanted to make this video. I'll be throwing up visuals, I think, all over as well, with the different parties I've used, because she just fits everywhere, and I've seen people asking, hey, how do I use the DD2 Duelist? What party does she work in? And that's really a hard question to answer, but it's also not, because she just works wherever you want her to work, so you can fit her wherever you want to. I could put her into any of these dungeons, and she would work. As long as I can debuff the enemy, and she has a very high debuff chance, so unless they're like relatively immune, and even then, she has a way of debuffing the enemy technically that almost nothing is immune to. She has a way of debuffing them. And even then, she has synergy just because of a gun. Even then, she has synergy because of the boot marking and stunning. So she has synergy almost no matter where she goes, and if nothing else, she can do damage and be a riposte dodge bot. It's all in how you use her, and once again, I do want to restate this fact. Don't be scared of her because of this aggressive defense stance. You don't have to be looking to be like, do I want to use that on every move? She's a transformation character. At its core, she's a transformation character. Unless you're using something that's going to change her away from aggressive, she's in aggressive stance. And then, if you want to use something to get her in defensive stance, which transforms her, she's in defensive stance. And then, unless you're changing her back into aggressive, which she'll do at the end of the battle, she'll stay in defensive stance for the rest of the battle. And then she has trinkets, once again, that can change how that works, but just read what the trinkets do. On attack, switch to defensive stance. It's easy as that. On combat end, switch to defensive. So with posthumous tutelage, you're going to be in defensive instead of aggressive. The sky's kind of the limit with the DD2 Duelist, and I kind of want to point that out, and a lot of people were asking like, hey, how do we use? What parties is she good in? And the answer is you just kind of have to use her, and you can throw her in anything. And I'm sorry that's kind of the answer, but she can be used anywhere. And that's kind of the fun part about her, is you can throw her in anywhere, and she's going to do well. So with that being said, have fun with the DD2 Duelist. I know this is a mod that came out a while ago, almost 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, something like that. But every once in a while I might do something like this just to like help cover mods that people seem to want guides and or help with. We might do a few more of these up and coming. So that was the DD2 Duelist. Hope everyone enjoyed it. Hope some people get some help with this. And if you have any suggestions on how to use the DD2 Duelist, combos that work, leave those down below too so other people can get some help with that. And with that being said, that'll be it for this time. So like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, and otherwise, as always, I wish you all well. I'll see you next time. And please, have a good one.